My name is Thomas from Sweden's Express, and this is a question for Greta. Could you please tell us what kind of message, what you are doing here today, what kind of message would you send by doing this to world leaders? And also can I ask you, do you think it's about time that President Trump would respond to what you have said today?
I think... I'm sorry, what was the first question?
What's the message you would like to send to our leaders by doing what you are doing?
I think what we want to send is... The message we want to send is to say that we have had enough. And anyone else wants to answer that question? I can't speak on behalf of everyone.
Anyone wants to answer about the message to world leaders? Mm-hmm.
What about President Trump? He's here today. Do you think he should respond in any way?
Well, it's all now rather painfully obvious that Greta Thunberg was used as a human shield by manipulative leftists. That's what we'll be talking about on today's video. You know, I've got to say it. You know, I don't blame her. I don't blame Greta. Actually, I feel sorry for her. I'm actually enraged at her parents and how they would let their daughter be so obviously manipulated, become a scripted mouthpiece for a bunch of left-wing environmentalist radicals. We're going to look at what's really going on behind the scenes here. We're going to end up finding an all too familiar face behind Greta's funding and this whole push to politically weaponize the environment. And we're going to see why it is all for naught. As it turns out, Greta was one big public relations disaster. But first, we are 48 hours away from the end of our Nationalist Populist book bundle with swag deal. You can support this channel by getting my 5 books on the rise of the nationalist populist age throughout the world. You'll get your very own MAGA hat. You get your own Turley Talks tumbler to put your coffee in. It's really quite lovely. And you get your very own Turley Talks Executive Journal to write your notes in, all for a $50 discount. Now, this offer ends in 48 hours. We only have a limited supply, so make it Christmas early by clicking on the link below. Support this channel and get your Nationalist Populist book bundle today with swag. All right, well, we can now all unfortunately see that Greta Thunberg really doesn't have much to say when she doesn't have a script in front of her. At a press conference at the United Nations, Thunberg was part of a panel of other young environmental activists, and she was asked two, rather simple questions. What kind of message would you send to world leaders? And also, can I ask you, do you think it's about time President Trump should respond to what you've said today? I mean, it was asked by a Swedish so-called reporter. I say so-called because for some reason this person actually believes Greta actually said something that President Trump ought to respond to. I think that just sort of shows you what kind of echo chamber these left-wing activists disguised as journalists live in. Well, her answer, we can't even really call it an answer. It was sad. I mean, to say the least. She deflected what were rather straightforward questions, and she referred to them to the others on the panel. It was sad to see. And it was incredibly revealing. It was revealing in that it was patently obvious that Greta is not speaking her own mind here. It was rather obvious that Greta's frankly over-the-top speech that the media fawned over, and that's already backfiring, as we'll see. It was rather obvious that that speech does not come from a whole lot of reflection on her part. It's she's become a mouthpiece for a bunch of activist adults who have no scruples exploiting a 16-year-old girl to further their political agenda. And what this should further underscore for us is that the modern environmentalist movement has actually nothing ultimately to do with the environment. It has only to do with power and manipulation. Nothing more. Science, in this sense, has now been replaced with neo-Marxist ideology on their part, an ideology that has no scruples whatsoever in exploiting and manipulating children for their own gain. When it comes to the actual science of the matter, ironically in all of this, science is now thoroughly on the side of the environmentalist skeptic. We saw this in particular with the absolutely hysterical, nonsensical claims that the Amazon rainforest was being burned to death, right? Our Earth is about to go through some mass extinction because the nationalist populist president there, Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil, is allowing the rainforest to burn all to hell. That was the kind of nutty stuff that you were hearing out of the mouth of people like Bill Maher and other unhinged leftists. And it forced climatologists to come out and say, guys, that's not what's happening here. One climatologist in particular over at AccuWeather published a piece that compared images of global fires from the year 2000, what's going on today. And they look exactly the same, at least to the untrained eye, right? The fact is that the Earth has always been burning continually in some way, shape, or form. What's happening now is not atypical of what occurs every year in terms of global fires. Moreover, fires are actually hard to see via satellites. What's seen is actually the smoke, since the smoke thins out and drifts into much larger areas than the fires themselves. However, the untrained media eye often mistakes cloud formations for smoke, and so they're prone to exaggerate the size and the extent of the fires. Again, climatologists have had to correct media activists often because they've designated cloud coverings as evidence of smoke and raging fires. The simple fact of the matter is that there are a lot of fires in South America, and it's not unusual. And it's no more unusual than the fires we see, say, for example, in California, right? Even the New York Times has admitted that the majority of these fires were set by farmers preparing Amazon-adjacent farmland for next year's crops, right? When all is said and done, there is simply no proof that Brazil is burning more today than it has in past years, right? According to Brazil's own National Institute for Space Research, they detailed over 76,000 wildfires over the years. So there's nothing unusual whatsoever about what's going on with the Amazon rainforest this year. But don't tell that to environmental radical alarmists who have increasingly replaced science with cultural Marxist political ideology. No one gets that better than Tucker Carlson. Check out what he had to say about the whole Greta Thunberg fiasco.
Well, if you're under 40, you might be surprised to learn that people didn't used to express concern about the environment by littering. That used to seem weird. But then the point of environmentalism used to be about nature and preserving it and protecting it. The point now is very different. The point now is political power. You gin up a crisis and you demand the population submits to your will or else. And as you do that, of course, you don't need to fight fair or acknowledge democracy or even make a rational case for your position. You do whatever it takes. You'll even use children if it helps. Just today, for example, a 16-year-old Swedish girl addressed the United Nations at the behest of climate activists. Here's part of what she said.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? If you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe.
You stole my childhood. Do what I want you to do or else you're evil. How do you respond to statements like that? The truth is you can't respond. And of course, that's the point. When you use children to demand power, they become a kind of human shield. You can hide safely behind them. No one can criticize you. But who would do something that unscrupulous? Anyone who would do that is someone who would literally do anything to seize control.
He's right. It's all ultimately about power, nothing more. and power manipulation. It's not about the environment. Greta Thunberg is not about the environment. She's about aiding and abetting left-wing neo-Marxists and their bid to dominate the Western political order. And we have some pretty solid proof of that, you know. You may have seen Greta Thunberg accompanied by this woman. Her name is being reported as Louisa Marie Neubauer. Miss Neubauer belongs to a far-left organization called One Foundation, which we can see here on her Twitter page. Well, would you like to take a wild guess who is one of the major donors and financiers of this far-left organization? Did you guess one George Soros? Well, what do you know, right? Soros, along with a number of other ultra-rich neo-Marxist activists, are directly behind this new 16-year-old sensation for environmentalism. Moreover, it's just so sad and so confirming just how pathetic our neo-Marxist media, the so-called mainstream media that fawned over Greta, have become. They know she's tied to George Soros. They know that, but they're not going to tell you, are they? They know that Greta is the youthful front for a mass movement that has ultimately nothing to do with the environment, but only raw political power manipulation. They know that, and it's backfiring. In our previous video, we pointed out that the more astute observers of our current political climate recognize that this kind of self-righteous virtue signaling was really a turnoff to most people. Again, remember, the vast majority of Western populations are not rabid neo-Marxist environmental activists. And we don't very much take to being self-righteously scolded by a 16-year-old girl. And you know what? Fellow 16-year-olds don't really care much for it either. You may be unaware, but Greta was the subject of a torrent of memes utterly mocking her. And again, these weren't all from a bunch of hardened right-wing activists. These were organically put together by the social media world because they thought she looked rather ridiculous in all of her virtue signaling, and they decided to have some fun with it. I even heard it from my students. My students would start, in class, they would start mimicking Greta in this voice. How dare you? How dare you come to me with your lies and empty words? How dare you? I mean, these are my students. It was hilarious. The social media world is laughing at her. Now, you won't hear this from the New York Times or CNN, but gang, the rest of the world is laughing at her. You know, I'm going to correct that. When all's said and done, they're not so much laughing at Greta. They're laughing at the left-wing neo-Marxist liberals that thought they could put her forward as their new face, as their human shield. That's what they're laughing at. And that's what we all ought to be laughing at. Watching leftist liberals fail again and again and again never gets old. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure to click on that link below and get your Nationalist Populist book bundle with swag at a $50 discount. The offer ends permanently midnight September 30th. So don't wait, 48 hours away. That's all you got. Get your Nationalist Populist book bundle with swag and know that you are supporting this channel and helping us to continue to analyze current events in light of awesome conservative trends so you can live in the present in light of even better things to come.